The moment I stepped into the church, the air changed. The guests had been chatting, smiling, sipping their pre-ceremony mimosas. But when I walked through those heavy oak doors in my floor-length gold silk dress, the noise dimmed. Heads turned. Whispers followed like shadows. And then I saw her Amanda, standing near the altar, her white lace gown glowing under the stained glass bouquet, trembling slightly in her hand, her expression twisted in real time from confusion to recognition, to fury. She made a beeline for me, each step a stomp on the marble floor. Her voice was low but laced with venom. "You just had to make it about you, didn't you?" I blinked. "I'm sorry, the dress, the color. You knew. I told you no white, no off-white, no anything close." I smiled gently. "This isn't white, Amanda. It's gold." Her jaw clenched. "You know exactly what you're doing." I looked down at the fabric, soft, luminous, dignified. It shimmered in the light, but didn't steal it. "I know I followed your rules. And I also know I've spent the last 2 years making myself small for your comfort." She stared at me, stunned into silence. "I didn't wear white," I said quietly. "But I'm done fading into beige." Behind us, the organ began playing softly. Guests began finding their seats. Someone called Amanda's name. She turned, composed herself, and walked away without another word. And I sat down in the second row as instructed, smiling, calm, fully aware that I had just committed the ultimate crime in her rulebook being visible. I hadn't worn white. I hadn't worn anything flashy. But I had dared to exist without apology. I dared to wear something beautiful. And that, in Amanda's world, was apparently enough to set fire to everything. But I didn't come to make a scene. I came to witness my son get married. And maybe, just maybe, I came to stop disappearing. It started long before the dress. When David brought Amanda home for the first time, she was charming, polished, composed, and armed with a kind of social grace that never quite reached her eyes. She called me Mrs. Willis for the first 3 months, even though I asked her politely to just call me Margaret. She was never rude, not exactly, but there were rules. Quiet ones, polite ones, and they were always for me. At their engagement dinner, I wore a soft lilac blouse, nothing fancy, just something I felt pretty in. Amanda's mother arrived in pearls and pastel Chanel, and Amanda pulled me aside afterward to say, "Next time we should coordinate family colors. It photographs better." Next time I wore navy. At her bridal shower, I brought a hand-stitched quilt I'd worked on for weeks. I was proud of it, each patch a different scene from their relationship. Everyone else gave gifts from the registry. After the shower, she messaged me, "Thank you for the quilt. It's beautiful. But let's stick to the list for future events. It's easier that way." I smiled through the sting and typed, "Of course, sweetheart. I understand." When the wedding invitations went out, she included a small card labeled dress code. It read, "Please refrain from wearing white ivory cream champagne, blush rose, gold sequins, rhinestones, or anything that could draw attention in photographs." Then, in smaller print, muted colors preferred. Muted. The word stayed with me. I held that card between my fingers and thought about the hundreds of events I'd stood in the background for school plays, football games, birthdays, where I baked the cake but wasn't in a single photo. Every time I made myself less so my son could shine. I didn't resent that, but I started to wonder, how many more times would I be asked to shrink? Amanda never said it outright. She didn't have to. It was in the way she assigned me to distant tables at planning dinners. The way she forgot to include me in group texts about the wedding menu. The way she called me David's mom to her friends, but never my future mother-in-law. It was in the compliments that felt like instructions. "You always dress so simply. It's sweet. You're so quiet." That's such a gift. And so when I found the gold dress, long, elegant, and understated, I saw it not as a rebellion, but as a reclaiming. I texted her a photo. "Would this be appropriate? It's not white, but I want to make sure it fits your vision." She left it on read, never replied. And that silence spoke louder than any answer. It said, "I don't see you." But for the first time in a long time, I saw myself. and I knew I wouldn't go back to being beige. I didn't sleep the night before the wedding. Not because I was nervous those days had passed. It was something else. A strange humming tension, like my spirit knew something was coming, but hadn't decided whether it would hurt or heal. At dawn, I brewed a pot of coffee, black and strong, and laid the dress across my bed. It shimmered softly in the morning light, gold silk, long sleeves, modest neckline, smooth as a whisper. It didn't scream. It didn't beg for attention, but it glowed. I ran my fingers over the fabric and breathed slowly. I didn't want to look younger. I didn't want to outshine the bride. I just wanted to feel like me again. A woman with a life, a story, a presence. I curled my hair into soft waves, minimal makeup, a touch of rose on my cheeks, nude lipstick, pearl earrings. My shoes were champagne satin low heels, elegant but comfortable. I fastened my late mother's bracelet around my wrist for courage. I arrived early. The church was already buzzing with guests in gray and navy and moss green. Amanda's muted palette was in full bloom. When I stepped out of the car, heads turned. Not in judgment yet, but in curiosity. A few older guests smiled warmly. One whispered, "Now that's class." I smiled back. Not smugly, just gratefully. It had been so long since anyone looked at me and saw more than the groom's mom. Inside, I found my seat in the second row. Not front and center, not hidden. Just quietly where I belonged. And that's when Amanda saw me. She was speaking with the florist, fussing over the altar arrangements, when her eyes met mine. Her expression faltered only for a second, but I caught it. She excused herself from the conversation and crossed the aisle with tight steps. "You wore that!" she hissed. I looked down at the dress, then back up at her. "Yes, it's gold. You asked me not to wear white." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "You knew what I meant." "I followed your rules," I said calmly. "No white, no ivory, no sequins, no lace, just silk, in gold." She glanced around as if gauging who had seen me, who had already judged her for letting me through the door. It's a lot. People are already talking." I softened my voice. "Amanda, I'm not trying to take anything from you. Today is your day. I just wanted to feel like I was in it too." She stared at me, unblinking, then spun on her heel and walked away. I sat back down, heart steady. I didn't need to win. I didn't need applause. I just needed to sit in that moment, knowing I hadn't dimmed myself to make anyone else comfortable. The ceremony began. Music floated through the air. David stood at the altar, glowing with anticipation. Amanda walked down the aisle like a magazine bride, flawless, composed, luminous in lace. No one remembered what I wore. No one gasped or clutched their pearls. But I remembered, because for the first time in years, I had shown up fully. And I hadn't asked permission to be seen. The reception was held in a sprawling country club ballroom with high ceilings, ivory tablecloths, and golden candelabras that flickered like starlight. Everything was perfect, elegant, controlled, just the way Amanda liked it. I walked in alone. There was no announcement, no fanfare, just a hostess who pointed me to table 17, tucked neatly near the service doors, just out of range of the photographer's lens. I didn't flinch. I sat down, folded my napkin gently, and smiled at the woman next to me, a distant cousin of Amanda's, who couldn't stop complimenting the venue. "Isn't this lovely?" she said. "Everything's just Pinterest perfect." I nodded. "It is. Very well curated." The gold dress flowed around my legs like liquid light, but I didn't fidget. I didn't adjust it to look smaller or softer. I just sat straight and serene and watched from the margins. I'd spent years there. Dinner was served, speeches began. Amanda's father gave a long toast about legacy and building futures. Her mother followed with a glowing tribute to graceful women who know their place. That one stung more than it should have, but I let it pass like wind through tall grass. I sipped my wine slowly. Then the microphone passed to David. He stood tall, beaming his new gold wedding band, catching the candlelight. "I want to thank everyone who made this day possible," he began. "Amanda, you are my heart, my partner, my home." Applause. She beamed. He continued, "And I want to take a moment to thank someone who's quietly been the strongest person I've ever known." I froze. He looked directly at me. My mother. Gasps rippled softly. Amanda's face didn't move, but her eyes tightened. David's voice didn't waver. She raised me alone, gave up more than I'll probably ever understand. And she never asked for anything in return, not even recognition. She's been overlooked more times than I can count, but she always showed up anyway. Today, she showed up again, and looked like royalty doing it. There it was. The room went still. A few people glanced at me wide-eyed. Others clapped. I didn't stand. I didn't wave. I simply placed my hand over my heart and nodded at my son, my beautiful grown son, who had finally seen me. Amanda didn't applaud. She sat motionless, lips pressed tight, eyes locked forward. The rest of the evening passed in a strange haze of tension and warmth. People approached me one by one. "That was beautiful. Your son is lucky. You look incredible, by the way. I'm so glad you wore that dress." I thanked each of them, not for the compliments, but for seeing me. Later, as the music swelled and the dancing began, Amanda never came near me again. But David did. He danced with me to an old Billie Holiday song, his hand on my shoulder, his eyes misty. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "For what? For letting her push you out. For not noticing sooner." I smiled. "You noticed when it mattered. We didn't talk about the dress. We didn't talk about seating charts or text messages left unread. We just danced. And for those 3.5 minutes, I wasn't an afterthought. I wasn't too much. I wasn't muted. I was gold. Not in defiance, not in vanity, but in presence, pure and whole. The dress still hangs in my closet, pressed clean, untouched since that day. Not because I'm holding on to bitterness, quite the opposite. I keep it there as a quiet monument to the moment I remembered who I was, before the years tried to soften my shine into silence. After the wedding, Amanda never reached out. Not once. No thank you, no apology, not even a veiled attempt at civility. And honestly, I didn't expect her to. David, however, changed. He started calling more, visiting. He stopped filtering his words to match her preferences. He asked real questions about my childhood, about the years I worked 2 jobs, about the recipes I used to make when we had almost nothing. For the first time in years, I felt like his mother again, not just a woman who carried the title. One afternoon, we sat together on my back porch. He handed me a photo from the wedding. It was the one moment the photographer had caught of us dancing. My gold dress caught the light just right, like sunlight had folded itself into the silk. He said, "I think this is my favorite photo from the whole day." I didn't say much. I just smiled and tucked it into the drawer, where I keep things that matter. And you know what? Life went on. But it went on differently. I stopped saying yes out of obligation. I stopped folding myself into someone else's narrative. I bought myself fresh flowers. I wore red lipstick to the grocery store. I booked a solo trip to Santa Fe and wore the gold dress again to a dinner where no one knew my name, but everyone noticed me. It was never about outshining the bride. It was about no longer being afraid to take up space. Sometimes people will tell you not to wear white. That's fine. But they don't get to decide if you disappear. They don't get to assign you the background while everyone else dances in the light. You don't need permission to matter. You don't need approval to be radiant. And you certainly don't need to apologize for being seen. To the women reading this who've been called too much, too loud, too visible, let me say this. You were never too much. They were simply not ready for your fullness. They were never taught how to honor a woman who no longer shrinks. I wore gold that day because I had earned it. Because my story mattered, even if it made someone else uncomfortable. Because I have survived things Amanda's curated world will never understand. Gold doesn't beg for attention. It just shines. And so will you. Have you ever been asked to dim your light for someone else's comfort? Have you ever been told to step aside, quiet down, or know your place? Share your story in the comments. Tell us about the moment you chose to take up space again, whether it was in a gold dress, a red lipstick, or just saying no when you used to say yes. Someone out there needs to hear that it's okay to be visible, that it's not selfish to be seen, that gold never fades.